We're going to cover medical doctor referrals for personal injury cases, medical doctor referrals for personal injury cases. And it's one of the biggest sources of personal injury cases. It's a very interesting dynamic, similar to the personal injury attorney in that there's no perceived need. So we're going to do a big picture approach and go into all the major key components. And so you kind of look at it from an organizational standpoint and a topic standpoint. So I'm not going to go into the vehicle of delivery very much today. What I'm going to go into today are all the major components and what works, what doesn't work, and why it works. So let's go into that. And then, so let's go into why we would want to do it first. So there's more personal injury cases that go to a medical doctor than an attorney. Remember, only a small, under 50%, it's only like 15% of the 20% of the cases actually go to a personal injury attorney. The vast majority of cases do not. But what they will do more than go to attorney is they'll go to their local medical doctor. That's what they will do. So there's way more potential business from the medical doctors than there is to the attorneys. Now, there's good and bad news about that. The attorneys, it's a forced market. So they have to refer those cases somewhere to establish the medical records. So that does make it easier. It definitely does. The medical doctors is not a forced market. So how can you, and they're not looking for you. So there's way more personal injury cases going to the local medical doctors. Remember, the second leading cause that patients will go to your local medical doctor is for back pain. You have way more patients going to your doctor, your medical doctors right around you for mechanical back pain than are looking for you, the chiropractor. And that's, of course, due to chiropractic's horrendous marketing over 120 years. So having said that, there's a large potential category here. And I'll share with you what I did also and how it worked for me. But you get to the big problem. What's the big problem? There's no perceived need for chiropractors. That's the problem. And it's not a force to market like there is for attorneys. So those are two huge problems. If you cannot overcome that, you're not getting any referrals. And if you've been in practice any time at all, you know you do not have medical doctors knocking on your door wanting to refer you personal injury cases. They're not even referring you back pain cases. You already know that. Okay? If you don't, you find out real quick. So, and I remember when I was in practice, I remember the medical doctor next to me before I got started and everything. Anytime I got a patient, and you always ask where you get your patients, where did you come from, for marketing purposes and many other factors. And they would say, the doctor next door. And I would very specifically say, did he refer you or did you ask him to go to a chiropractor? Well, he never referred anybody to me. The patients always asked him, do you think it would be okay to go to chiropractor, to Dr. Paul over here? Now, he didn't stop them, but he never sent one patient, and that's medicine. So there is a way around it, and that's what this is. That's what we're going into is how do you go get around that? So what's the solution? Well, again, when you get back to marketing, if there's no perceived need, remember, publicity and advertising will not work. Remember, there's three types of marketing. There's publicity, there's advertising, and there's educational sales. So if there's already a perceived need, you want to use advertising and publicity. That's what you do want to do. If there's no perceived need, but a high probability target market, like with attorneys, or in this case, medical doctors, you have to use educational sales because there's no perceived need. And the great thing about educational sales is it works fantastic. It works great. When you know what you're doing and you know how to do it, it works great because there's a lot of business there and you have very little competition. Very few chiropractors know what to say to an attorney. Very few chiropractors know what to say to a medical doctor for referrals. So I always keep saying it's like in chiropractic, there's good and bad news. The bad news is there's only 8% looking for a chiropractor. The good news is there's only 8% looking for a chiropractor. And you go, well, how the hell does that work? Well, out of that 92%, there's a lot of people with back personal injuries, back pain, neck pain, but they're just not looking for a chiropractor. So you have this massive market, but they're not looking for you. And you got no competition. So the example I always give is like there's this one small pond over here with very few fish in it, and you got 98% of the chiropractors trying to nab, the 8% fish. And then you have this huge lake over here that's totally stocked with fish, and you got like two chiropractors fishing out of there getting rich. That's the difference it makes. It's night and day when you know educational sales versus when you don't. So, and of course, that's how I was able to open 77 offices in 20 states. I didn't wait around for the 8%. I never would have been able to do what I did if I waited for 8%. So, if no perceived need, so emotional sales works. Unfortunately, it's not profession related. It's individual based. What do I mean by that? That you're not going to get patients from a medical doctor because you're a chiropractor. Like you'll send patients to a neurologist even though you don't know them because you already have that trust and they've been branded, etc. You'll do the same with an orthopedist, same with a medical doctor. Okay, you'll do that, but that will not happen to chiropractic. And again, I don't want to get into all the reasons why, but bottom line is just a terrible job of marketing with chiropractic and the confusion and chiropractors saying they can do everything. And well, that creates one hell of a big problem in marketing. And so thank you, chiropractic. That's where you stand. Now, the good news is you got this massive amount of business. That's the great news. But you have to know educational sales. So it's not professionally related. It will not, when you do get, in other words, when they referred to me, it had nothing to do with me being a chiropractor. It had to do with me selling them. In other words, they trusted me because I sold them. They didn't trust chiropractic. In other words, just because I sold them, they didn't start referring to every other chiropractor. They don't trust every other chiropractor. They trusted me now. That's how that works. So that's what I say when it's not profession related. And so you don't want to base anything on chiropractic. It's going to be you. So if you do it, it'll work great. But if you try to use chiropractic as the means, you're in trouble because that carries too much negative weight. So you have to sell them. They will buy into you, not the profession. Now that's a key concept there. That's a huge concept because I see a lot of chiropractors talking about selling the profession. Like you better not sell the profession. They don't want anything to do with it. They would have already bought it if they had bought into it, they would have already bought into it long ago. So that's a major, major concept. In other words, it's up to you. And then don't use the profession. It's up to your knowledge and what you know. And then definitely don't use the profession. Matter of fact, I tell them, when we go deeper into this, I tell them all the things we don't do that chiropractors say they can do because I don't want to scare the hell out of them. So let's go into some of the basics. Obviously, this is not a marketing course, but this is, going into the basics. We're looking at the big picture of marketing relative to medical doctor referrals. So remember, when you look at the basics of a market, there's always a target market, right? So there's always demographics, psychographics, geographics, gateways, USB, vehicle delivery. Those are major categories relative to a target market. So you missed that, you missed everything. You just made everything very difficult. So then there's the marketing campaign. Well, what are you going to do or say to get that market's attention to pay attention to you? Okay. And remember, they're not looking for you. So it has to be what's called a campaign. You can't do a one-off. It's got to be a series. And the series, it's a multiple step series. And of course, we talk about all this in great detail when we go into marketing. But it's the series that stair steps them into awareness, interest, desire. In other words, the whole goal of the campaign is not to get business. It's to stir their awareness from not even paying attention to you to going, oh, I might be interested in listening to what you have to say. That's the purpose of a campaign. Okay. And then that takes us to the educational sales. And of course, the core of educational sales is number one, established need is equal to obstacles divided by trust. That's the absolute core of marketing right there. So out of everything in marketing, knowing how to establish need is the absolute single most important thing you can know in anything relative to marketing, period. It's the epicenter of marketing. And then how to overcome the obstacles and relative to that target market. And the obstacles of the need for a general practitioner to send you personal injury cases is totally different than an attorney. They're not in it for the money. For the attorney, it's about the money. For the medical doctor, it's not. So it's all these concepts stay the same, but the message is totally different in these categories. So it's the same with obstacles. They don't have the same obstacles as attorneys. Some of them relative to trust they have, but and then of course you got to do the follow-up. You got to be able to do what you say you're going to do and then follow up with the relationship. But if you're going to simplify marketing, there it is. Target marketing campaign, and then establish need, overcome the obstacles, affect trust, and follow up. There it is. How good you are at that determines how much business you're going to get.